There was no alarm clock 40,000 years ago. No commute, no inbox, no clocking in at 9 and clocking out at 5. And yet somehow, for the overwhelming majority of the roughly 300,000 years our species has existed, people still manage to eat, raise children, build shelters, and pass down everything they knew to the next generation. So what exactly filled those hours? Because job, as we understand it, a fixed role, a fixed schedule, a paycheck at the end of it, is an almost embarrassingly recent invention. For most of human history, there was no such thing. There was just the day and what needed doing in it. The strange part is that anthropologists who've actually studied surviving hunter-gatherer societies keep running into the same uncomfortable finding. Ancient humans likely worked less than we do. Not more, less. Studies of groups like the Hadza in Tanzania or the Kung in the Kalahari suggest that gathering enough food to survive took somewhere around 3 to 5 hours a day on average. That's it. The rest of the day wasn't leisure exactly, but it also wasn't labor in the way we think of it now. It was something in between, something we don't really have a modern word for. So let's actually walk through what filled that time, starting with the obvious one, food. Contrary to the image of desperate, constant hunting, most calories in a hunter-gatherer diet came from gathering, not hunting. Roots, nuts, berries, tubers, insects in many regions. This was typically done by groups moving together, talking, teaching children which plants were safe, which ones healed a wound, which ones would make you violently sick. It was slow, social, and skill-based, more like a shared errand than a shift at work. Hunting itself, when it happened, could take a whole day or several, but it wasn't a daily requirement. Successful hunts fed a group for days, sometimes over a week, which freed up enormous stretches of time afterward. And that freed up time is where things get interesting, because a huge portion of it went into something we'd now put under the umbrella of maintenance. Toolmaking sits here. A stone axe or a bone needle doesn't last forever, and someone has to know how to make and fix one. Hide scraping, cordage making, basket weaving, fire tending. None of these were assigned as a job to one specific person, the way a factory assigns a station. They were skills nearly everyone in the group held to some degree, done as needed, taught hands-on, passed from older members to younger ones through direct observation rather than instruction. Shelter worked the same way. Building or repairing a hut, a windbreak, a lean-to wasn't a career. It was a periodic task tied to weather, to moving camp, to a structure wearing out. Groups typically weren't building from scratch constantly either. Many hunter-gatherer societies were what anthropologists call semi-nomadic, meaning they returned to the same seasonal camps year after year, sometimes reinforcing existing structures rather than starting over. So even shelter building was more occasional than constant. But here's the part that tends to surprise people the most. A genuinely large chunk of the day was social. Sitting. Talking. What researchers who study modern hunter-gatherer societies have documented is a striking amount of time spent on conversation, storytelling, gossip, and just being near each other. Anthropologist James Sussman, who spent years living with and studying the Juhansi people of southern Africa, has pointed out that this downtime wasn't wasted time in their world. It was where culture actually got transmitted. Origin stories, moral lessons, practical knowledge about the land, warnings about dangerous animals or plants. All of it moved through casual conversation, not formal teaching sessions. There was no schoolhouse. The campfire was the schoolhouse, and it ran every single evening. Play mattered too, and not just for children. Music, rhythm, dance, these show up in some of the oldest artifacts we have. Bone flutes, tens of thousands of years old, painted caves clearly used for gathering and ritual, not shelter. These weren't side projects squeezed in after real work. In a world without a division between labor and leisure, art and ritual were simply part of what a day could hold, alongside gathering food and fixing a spear. Child rearing deserves its own mention here, because it looked almost nothing like the isolated, single household model most of us grew up with. Anthropologists use the term alloparenting to describe what seems to have been the norm. Children raised not just by their biological parents, but aunts, grandparents, older siblings, and unrelated adults in the group, all sharing the responsibility. A child might spend the morning with their mother gathering, the afternoon with an older cousin learning to track animal prints, and the evening being told stories by an elder. Nobody was doing childcare as a designated job. It was simply woven through everyone's day, distributed across the whole group rather than concentrated onto one or two people. Rest gets overlooked too, but it was substantial. Without artificial light stretching the day the way electricity does now, ancient humans' waking hours were largely bound by sunrise and sunset. Midday heat, especially in warmer climates, often meant a natural lull, something close to what we'd now call a siesta, built out of luxury, but simply biological sense. There was no incentive to grind through the hottest hours of the day when the food was already gathered and the group's needs were largely met. Now, none of this is to romanticize the past. Life was also shorter, more physically dangerous, and far more vulnerable to famine, injury, and disease than modern life. This isn't a story about ancient humans having it easier in every sense. But specifically on the question of daily time and labor, the evidence keeps pointing the same direction. The 8-hour, 5-day structure we treat as natural, almost biological, is actually a product of agriculture and later industrialization, not of human nature itself. Farming, once it took hold roughly 12,000 years ago, demanded far more sustained daily labor than foraging ever had. Fields don't tend themselves, and a bad harvest meant real disaster in a way that a bad day of gathering usually didn't. The factory system centuries later locked that intensified labor into rigid clock-bound shifts, and that's the version of work we inherited, not the one our species spent most of its existence living inside. So when you picture a day in the life of an ancient human, the accurate image isn't grinding survival from dawn to dusk. It's closer to a rhythm. A few hours of focused gathering or tool repair in the morning, a long social stretch in the middle of the day, maybe a nap through the worst heat, evenings spent around a fire with stories, music, and each other. No job title, no performance review, just the day, filled with exactly what needed doing, and then, remarkably often enough, a great deal of time left over for absolutely nothing in particular at all.